All right. What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to the Onyx Report, Black Masculinist news for the day. I hope you are well. Good to see so many of you in the building already. Already up to 86. Hit the like button as you come in if you would. All right. Shout out to everybody out there. Y'all know the deal. Like, share, subscribe, join, and donate. Support the channel so we can continue to bring you these independent black male thoughts. You know, as brothers are producing our own content, we need to make sure we continue to support one another so we can increase to do that and maintain a space where independent black male thought can be explored without hindrance, without undue and unnecessary and often misandry-based criticism. So we need to protect this space. So please make sure you do so by supporting the channel and others like it. But I hope y'all are well. Hope everybody's doing good. Back from a little bit of a hiatus that I will explain a little more in detail a little later this week. Got a lot going on. It is the week before the semester starts, so I'm a little busy with that. But I can also tell you that it's bigger than that. So we'll get into that soon enough. Let me shout out some of the brothers in here. First and foremost, let me also shout out Inner Light Radio. I'm broadcasting today on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitch, Twitter, Inner Light Radio, of course, and YouTube, no question. So again, support the channel. You can do so through Venmo. You can do so through PayPal, Cash App, Patreon, and become a channel supporter, become a patron of the channel. You can become a member right here on YouTube by hitting the membership button right next to the subscribe. And if you haven't, make sure you also subscribe so we can get this going. Shout out to Jarvis, and extend some congratulations on the book. Yes, people, it is finally out. It is finally out. It's been something you could pick up early for a while now, but let me see. It has finally come out, and I gotta thank brothers who have been supporting right out the gate. Now, I didn't set the price for the book. It is what it is, so that's something that's determined by the publisher, but it is on discount right now. It's 20% off, it looks like, back to school sales or whatnot. You can get the ebook as well. You can see it right here on the middle of the screen, right next to the hard book. But I do urge you to go ahead and pick up the primary copy. Hold on to it. Solutions for Anti-Black Misandry, Flat Blackness, and Black Male Death, the Black Masculinist Term. So it's out today, and I want to thank all the brothers who have gone out their way to catch it early and to promote it on social media and let other people know they did so. I really want to thank y'all for doing so. And for those who haven't yet, if you purchased a copy or if you're about to, go ahead and shout it out, in social media and let people know. So I appreciate y'all for supporting. You'll see this is a book that comes out of the discussions we've been having right here. You know what I mean? And I plan to continue to do more. So, this is it. So check it out. It's on Rutledge.com. The link for the book is in the description box. I'll go ahead and put it also in the live comment section. You can check it out there. So yeah, just wanted to extend a thank you to everybody who supported, and I thank you in advance if you're about to, if you're planning to. So shout out to Jarvis, Black, what's up? Sirius, we got Hakeem in here. Roaring Sun, what's good? We got Barry. Appreciate that support, Barry. Putting the info in there. I really do appreciate that. Let's see. We got Blood Crow, Lord of Brooklyn. Prince, what's up? Christopher. Kiel, what's happening? We got Hey Rue in the building. Big Cap. You know, Ron. AB Media. What's up, AB? What's going on? Better You. What's up? Ian, supporting the channel as usual. Shout out to Ian Graves. Appreciate that, man. Always putting the audience on point. Thank you for that. Marcus, what's up? Salute to you as well. High Scholar, what's good? Y'all check out High Scholar's channel. Support the brother. Shout out to you, Sam. Coming in from LinkedIn. What's good with you, Sam? Thanks for that support. Got Queen Kalila in the building. What's going on, lady? Hope you're well. Joshua, what's up? Jagu Archery. What's going on? I'm into archery, man. I got to get back to the range. Shout out to you. Floyd, what's up? Got Ogun's Machete. That's what's up. All right. Zach in the house. Born Free. What's going on, Joshua? Appreciate that. Joshua says he just bought it. Thank you for that. Thanks for that altogether. I'm humbled by it. People have asked about signed copies. Here's the thing. I'm still waiting on my copy. That's the cold part about it. So I got to figure out how to do the signed copy thing because, they late on sending me. Matter of fact, I asked my editor, I said, hey man, when am I going to get a copy? He sent it up to the rep from the press, and he was like, when do I get my copy too? So they're, I don't know what's going on with it, but shout out to Sam. Appreciate that, compliment. But I'll figure it out, Ian, one way or another, because you're not the first to bring that up. What's up, Ron? What's going on? Let's see. We got Freddie in here. We got Shepherd, Urban Naturalist. Appreciate that support. Thank you for that. Dr. Smith, what's the word, man? I hope you're well. Kazi, what's going on? D. Scott, what's going on? Green Gorilla in the house. Shout out to Green Gorilla. Hope you're well, good brother. Dr. CD2, appreciate that. Congrats on the new publication. Appreciate it. All right. So we getting it going. We got a number of things to cover today. Let's see, we already got trolls in the building. They come in early. So Cat asking me if masculinists are doing nothing but dividing the community. See, this is interesting to me. Right? It wasn't dividing the community for the last 50 years when black women decided to go in on black men in every media and every context possible, from academics to media. But when black men finally respond, it's somehow black men's problem and it's our mistake and we're dividing the community. No. Black men have actually just never responded in any collective fashion. And my thing is, I want to help provide not only the vocabulary, but the platform for black men to figure out what they want. Because they damn sure are overdue to do so. You know what I mean? And if keeping the community together at the expense of their well-being is the cost, it's too high. Black men have every right to decide which way they want to go and how. And if nothing else, to outline what the fuck they need. And I don't give a good goddamn if you like it or not. Brothers have long since been walked on, dismissed, played down, and villainized in and out of the community. So they damn well earn the right to articulate their own needs and to do so freely, without shaming, judgment, all of that bullshit. Black men should be able to do it, and I support it. So it ain't even about, whether we all agree or disagree on whatever. It's about being able to have that conversation, because we never have. And we've never even had the platform to do it, let alone the opportunity. So I fully support black men being willing to do it, and I want them to. Shout out to BGS. What's good, man? Got BGS in the building. What's up, Amari? All right, Jerome, OPW. Number of people in the house. It is what it is. So, got 223. Hit the like button. Got to cover a few things. Now, y'all know that I've been, supporting this particular company here. I'll put it, it's Actively Black. You can go ahead and check them out. Go to their website, activelyblack.com. They have some gear that might be of interest to you. and I wanted to find a quality company founded by a brother. Shout out to Leroy Booker for the support. Appreciate that. Shout out to Greg and to Black Power for the Cash App. Appreciate it. You can put in Onyx Report 23 for 10% off a discount, but support Black male-owned businesses, right? And I figured that would be a good start for the Onyx Report. We're going to endorse any kind of product or whatnot. It needs to be something that brothers themselves are doing. So shout out to Actively Black. Check that out and support. If that's something you're interested in. Dardar, appreciate that support. So hit the like button. Leroy, what's good? Appreciate it. Hit the like button, support the channel, donate, like, share, subscribe. You know what it is. Join so we can continue to grow. So, wanted to kind of acknowledge the book and thank everybody for the preemptive support for that. Mention Actively Black, Actively Black, and get that going. But I was saying this week is important. And truth be told, I've been waiting 18 years for this very week for a couple of reasons. One is, of course, I'm grateful that the book is finally out. People get to, check it out. And the other is my son is packing for college. So I am driving him, or we are driving to school Friday. And for you fathers out there, some of you guys have already you've been through this. Some of you haven't yet. This is, it's an emotional moment. You watching your child grow up. Shout out to KMK for the Cash App. Appreciate that. And it's a big transition. This is my only one. So he's heading off, and I got the empty nest thing going, and it's a weird transition. I'm anxious about it, excited about it, and a little sad all at the same time. So I've been a little all over the place, and we've been really getting ready this last couple of weeks. So I do apologize for being a little scarce. What's good, Dr. Thunder? Dr. Thunder in the house. So yeah, man, it's been all over the place. We just been having them long father-son conversations, many of which involve condoms. Y'all know what the deal is, but it's going down. So it's blowing my mind that the same kid that just yesterday was going to kindergarten is heading off to college, man. So it's throwing me. I'm a little discombobulated, but it is what it is. So like I said, this is a big week for a number of reasons. It is what it is. Shout out to Barry Little. Appreciate that. Says like, share, subscribe, become a member, donate, buy the book. Thanks a lot. Appreciate that, man. Yeah. So anyway, that's one of the reasons that it's been a real kind of emotional little time period because there's a lot going on. But today we're going to talk about the gynocracy, which I do also talk about in the book. We're going to talk about why the gynocracy is important. What is it about the gynocracy that is problematic, and why? And I'm just going to give you guys a number of examples. Appreciate that, Shepherd. Says congrats to your son. Thank you for that. What's up, Dardar? Appreciate that. Dr. Thunder says 8 years behind me, man. Yeah, man. It's a trip. It's a trip. It's a trip. That's all I can say. But yeah, so we're going to talk about this gynocracy issue a little bit and kind of give some examples of some of the things that Black men have been reflecting on and trying to decide, how they want to deal with, whether they want to deal with it at all and to what extent. Now, the first thing I will put out there, shout out to Mr. Smith, says just bought the book. Much appreciation. Black Toxic Masculinist was good. Andre. But, in order to deal with this question of a gynocracy, we first have to talk about this whole question of a Black patriarchy. And in the academy, this has been a language that's been used for decades to castigate Black men and define them as some type of monster, right? And so the argument used is that there's been this oppressive Black patriarchy, and that you have to go back in time to see how since slavery, they have oppressed Black women, right? Black women, Black LGBT, the whole kind of deal. Black patriarchy becomes the face of Black being Black monstrousness. And the framework for it really comes out of white feminism, because this is what white women were doing with white men. So in order to, ride the skirt tails of white women politically, and in terms of policy, and in terms of access to resources, and in terms to nominal access to middle-class life. You had many Black female academics, Black feminists, who made this argument about Black men being these monstrous oppressors. And often when you get in casual conversations and ask them to define Black patriarchy, I noticed, especially even in classes, even when I was still a student, what I would often hear would be individual cases of abuse, right? Individual cases of intimate partner violence. Or they would talk about family members who had experienced intimate partner violence. Shout out to Clay Bisbee. I just got one at Clay Bisbee. Just dropped my son off at WA State. Empty nesting 2. This is a crazy, weird feeling. Who says single dads can't do it? That's what's up. That's what's up. That's what I'm talking about. Shout out to Stuart D. What's good? Appreciate that. It says book ordered. But, so as white women created this dynamic, Black women followed suit because it was politically useful to do. And Black men didn't really have a platform to defend themselves anyway. Outside of music and comedy, you didn't really have a concerted space where Black men as a collective could respond. We didn't have the same access to media that Black women got. So as they use this narrative, and they're continuing to do it, we know there's a rehashing of Color Purple coming out again to reindoctrinate another set of generations of Black women and girls and LGBT into hating heterosexual Black men. This whole dynamic really starts out as a replicating of white women's political strategy, right? Castigating men to advance themselves through, victimization, pity, so on and so forth. So Black women follow suit. And so, even going back to Black political movements, they've all been recast, especially in the academy and in activist spaces, as oppressive time periods where Black men, in this quote unquote fight against, oppression in the larger sense, only contributed to it. Right? This is the framing of it. And I do, by the way, I didn't mean to say quote unquote, I do believe that you actually had Black men that were fighting against racism, white supremacy, and the whole deal. I'm not downplaying that by any measure, but to have that reframed as Black men oppressing Black women in the midst of doing so, and then hearing accusations that all brothers wanted was white women, or all brothers wanted was to oppress Black women, and using individual accounts of intimate partner violence and films and works like Alice Walker's, just to castigate these Black men at the same time. All of this has been horrendous. And Black men are only, in a collective sense, starting to respond 50 years later. And the first question I see from a lot of different people, from a lot of different ideological camps, is, why are you responding? Why don't you shut up? Why don't you shut up and take it? You know what I mean? Why are you causing division? I'm like, division was caused 50 years ago. And brothers ain't said shit for 50 years for the most part, outside of a few individuals. And nobody had anything to say about how divisive that shit was now. But now it's divisive because men are starting to respond to it. And they're responding to it because a lot of this has been passed down to younger generations. And it's been in the culture. So it's not necessarily, just something you see on TV. It's something you see in the woman across from you on your first date. It's something you see when you're sitting in college classes for the first time and you're listening to how these women are framing your very existence while sitting next to you. You're seeing it in every way possible, in every venue possible. And for the most part, we've been kind of quiet about it. But this whole question about this Black male patriarchy, I'm going to show you why. We haven't had one, but I'm going to show you from a contemporary standpoint, right? Now, there's been a more recent article than this, but we're going to go with this one anyway, just because this was just a couple days ago. Some of you may have seen this, right? Lansing police say handcuffing 12-year-old Black boy taking out trash was unfortunate misunderstanding after mistaking child for car theft suspect, right? You see some of the clips there. This is the young man right here on the left in the light green shorts and the white t-shirt, right? He was taking the trash out. Now, his father did come out. I'm not going to read through this whole article, but I will put it in the description. Maybe I'll put it also in the comments as well. So if you want to check it out. The father, in a more recent article than this one, stood up and said that he didn't want an apology. He wanted the city to rectify this. I didn't get a chance to glance at the article. I just saw it before the show, but he's pushing this. And you see it. There's actually, video of the father confronting the police. But basically, they handcuffed his son, taking the trash out. Right? Says police in Lansing, Michigan, released details on what exactly happened in a viral video of a young Black boy being handcuffed and detained while taking out the trash, which outraged the surrounding community and many people online. Now I'm going to take a little mini poll, because from the age of 9 through 12, my friends and I started to experience this as Black boys. Whether we were pulled out of, I come out of the time period in the 80s where, when a movie came out, the lines would be out around the block. And depending on the movie, you might have people camping out for multiple days to secure their spot at the beginning of the line. You literally see, people in tents, like when Star Wars, all that kind of stuff came out. So you had a lot of that at that time. And I remember police rolling up, pulling me and my friends out, throwing us on the ground, patting us down, leaving us there to humiliate us. I remember walking to school and having cops, slowly driving behind you while you're walking to school. This happened to me from middle school through high school, pretty much at least several times a year, right? They just cruise behind you while you're walking. Imagine how slowly a car has to be going to cruise behind you for half a mile while you're walking to school, then hit their little, sound thing, pull you out, throw you over the hood, open up your bags, go through your stuff, throw your bags on the ground, tell you to leave. And this would happen multiple times, right? I'm coming from a single mother home. My mom is stressed. She's upset every time I talk to her. She's got another thing going on. She's trying to keep all the balls in the air, the plate spinning. Last thing I want to do is tell her about this. So I didn't. And this went on off and on for years with different cops. To this day, not that I would, but if I ever pulled out my Social Security card, you will see a handwritten version of the Social Security numbers on my card right above it, written in ink. Because a cop decided one day to ask for my ID, pulled out my Social Security number, asked me to recite it, and hand wrote it in ink on top of my number on the card. And I left it there as a reminder. I'd never forget how early this shit started. And it started around the age of 9. So what this young man went through, this is nothing new. Black men have been going through this for generations. I want to hear, for all the brothers listening, put a 1 in the chat if you've experienced something like this between the age of 9 and 10 years old as a Black male. Whether you're harassed, whether you're, drawn out, purposely, embarrassed, whatever it may have been, put a 1 in the chat if you experienced that dynamic. You found yourself in some way, shape, or form harassed at a young age by the police, simply for walking somewhere, going somewhere. Didn't even matter. You didn't have to be doing anything particularly special. Okay. Yeah. Look at all those 1s. The reason I asked that question is before we can talk about a gynocracy, we got to start by talking about this whole question of a Black patriarchy. And if you want to know why we haven't had, aside from the fact that patriarchies in and of themselves are systemic entities, right? They're backed by resources. They're backed by structures. They're backed by institutions, not just cultural, not just momentary, and damn sure not just a product of one person physically assaulting another in an act of intimate partner violence, which is, by the way, bidirectional in the Black community anyway, meaning that it's equally violent from women to men as it is from men to women. But somehow Black men get castigated as patriarchs that oppress their communities. But this is the very reason why I'm saying that doesn't happen. That's why I'm saying that this doesn't happen. See, what happens to this young man is what happened to a lot of us, too many of us. And these are the types of practices that prevent there from being this oppressive caste. Because here, at the end of the day, it's not just that cops can harass you, it's that Black women can also use police to control you. And this has historically happened, not only with cops, but even with the Black Panthers. When the Black Panthers became an institution, prevalent in the community, and my father was one, women would tell their men, I'm gonna call the Black Panthers on you if you touch me, and sometimes would use that to fabricate them. So you could do that with community protectors, you could do that with the police, you could weaponize institutions against Black men. This is one of the major reasons why we didn't have an oppressive patriarchy, because it was too easy to upend any given Black men, let alone a group of them, as far as hurting anybody else, but nobody gives a damn as long as black men are hurting each other. That's a whole nother question. Black men can hurt each other, nobody cares. But when it comes to this question of an oppressive patriarchy that damages and hurts others in the community, it's been extremely easy to undo black men. And now you have the added ability of false accusations, which many black men don't have a sufficient defense for. Unless you're like Chris Brown and you have text evidence or video evidence that she's lying, you could be up a creek just because he makes the accusation. There's no way to maintain an oppressive patriarchy if it's this easily upended. So again, look at all the ones in the chat of how many brothers experience this. What I'm pointing out to you with this young man is not uncommon by any measure. So I just wanted to be clear. When we start talking about a gynocracy, the reason we can talk about a gynocracy is because there's no resistance to one. Matter of fact, they are supported institutionally. Black men are not. And patriarchy as a concept relies on institutionalization. Black men do not have the means to institutionalize it, and they've been denied them. I'm not saying they don't have the capacity to develop institutions. I'm saying that the attempt to build institutions has actively been acted against for black men for centuries. Black men have achieved despite the lack of support, despite the attack, not because of any type of support extended. Even in this last pandemic, there was no effort to extend support for black men, entrepreneurially, economically, employment-wise, health-wise, none. Black men were the most, vulnerable in terms of housing, hell, even in terms of health in regard to the pandemic. Nobody gave a damn. The articles were always on everybody else but. Right? So this is the environment we're in. And I just wanted to clarify that because as we talk about a gynocracy, we have to be clear. There's a reason that this functions the way it does. Because there are so many that act against it. Now, I'm going to give you a couple examples of what I'm talking about when I talk about this issue of a gynocracy. There are several different areas, and there are more. I'm just going to point out a couple for today. Yeah, we have issues of what I call solipsism, disagreeableness, right? The socialization of boys into subservience or being concuserves, as I call them, right? Excused violence, right? And the withholding of affection, right? These are the areas of gynocratic practice we're going to look at today. And Bud Crawford falls in that line, in that space. So the first one I'm going to talk about I'm just going to give a brief example of, and you'll notice I'll probably be giving increased numbers of examples as we go forward, but this one is just of solipsism, and it's just going to be a real quick hit. This is a clip from YouTuber Samantha Lee, who I'm not particularly a fan of. I think she's the ex-wife of Tyrese, the actor or whatever, recently divorced. I'm not a fan of hers by any means, but there's something I want to show you in this clip that's happening that I think is important, right? So here is Samantha Lee. She's not really talking. She's playing a clip from someone else. So check this out and give me a 1 if you can hear it.
Apologize differently than women. Men, we focus on intention.
Sounds extremely low. What is going on there? Let's try this another way. Oh man, what is happening here? Did you guys hear that? Because it played real low to me. Let's try this again. Put it in here. Every week it's a different set of issues, I tell you. Here we go. Let's try this
man, I didn't mean to. Women focus on outcome. They don't care about intention as much.
Okay, I see what it is. My bad. Apologize. Getting it together. All right, so let's start it over again. Here we go.
Intention. Men, you apologize differently than women. Men, we focus on intention. Oh man, I didn't mean to. Women focus on outcome. They don't care about intention as much. If you hurt a woman's feeling, you're like, I didn't mean to. From my experience, what they typically hear is you trying to justify doing it. You're trying to give a reason as to why you did it. Men, when they apologize to their women and they're like, I didn't mean to, you're focusing on the wrong thing. You gotta focus on the emotion and then a little bit on the intention. First thing I would do is ask her how I made her feel. If she tells you, you hurt my feelings, don't go into an explanation as to why you hurt her feelings, because now you're just saying, I hurt your feelings because that's wrong. What you want to do is say, oh wow, I'm sorry I hurt your feelings. Then empathize. I would also be hurt if something like this happened. Now, intention, just a little bit. I didn't mean to do that. And then future state, listen, I won't do this again. And then that's it. If you do it like that, what you'll find is your arguments will not go as long. Man, you'll...
Okay. Fair use. I'll be doing some video clips today. Now, as far as Samantha Lee is concerned, she does a lot of all kinds of stuff. She criticizes women. You know, she's one of the few that doesn't avoid that. And that's one of the things I think is a huge problem when we start to talk about this whole issue of gynocracy, is that few are willingly active to critique women or to even critique women's political behavior in a larger sense, in a macro sense. We avoid it at all costs, which is part of the problem. But what I'm framing here as solipsism, right, is that there's been an ongoing practice, especially in relationship counseling circles, where you have to teach men to be accountable to women's emotional needs, right? This is the kind of culture we've been associated with and indoctrinated with for years. It's all centered around her. It's all centered around her needs, her outlook. You know, y'all tell me, have you seen a bevy of commercials or clips out there telling women how to apologize to men and treat them accordingly? Or is it more common the reverse, to see the reverse, right? This is not really a dig at Samantha Lee per se, because she doesn't even actually say anything. She just cheers this along, right? But you have this culture where it's all about training men to accommodate women. This is what I call men's relationship emotional labor, right? We got to perform a certain type of emotional labor. We're not hearing. Now, I don't know this brother, and I'm not saying he doesn't have a clip in this interview where he teaches women to do the same. I'm not saying he doesn't. But what I'm saying is what is more acceptable, especially in Black culture, but in mainstream culture as well, is to leave the critique at men's door, to make the argument that the problems that people are having in relationships are men's issues. Men are the cause. Women are just special snowflakes that are perfect and, you know, float in the air, and they just keep having to endure these fucked up Negroes. This is the process that I'm actively trying to disrupt. This assumption that men have to be the problem. And men do it too. Men will be the first ones to critique other men. And I'm not saying that there's no reason to do so. The only reason I don't join in the critique is, for me, we got 50 years of it at least. There's plenty of criticism going to Black men. I don't need to join it. I don't need to add to it. There's plenty of it out there. I'm not saying Black men are perfect by any measure, but all the critiques of Black men, you don't have to look hard to find. They've been ample. They've been readily available for generations. But when you actually say, let's look at how this culture treats men and what the social expectations of men are, and how women contribute to those social expectations because they benefit them, then all of a sudden it's divisive. That's what I'm talking about. So in this clip, he goes to great lengths to show you how to properly apologize to a woman. I myself don't run across very many that actually teach women how to apologize to men. And I can tell you, they're not good at it. They're not good at it. Matter of fact, let me see. This is, hold on. I mean, it's comical, but y'all know, that there are plenty of moments where things that are supposed to be comical are a lot more than that. I'm trying to see where I put it, but I think, okay, it's not coming up. Let me see if I put it over here. Bear with me for a moment. Because I know I saved it. Okay. I know where it is. Sometimes I put this stuff up And I use my Facebook page a lot. So those of you who are on Facebook that follow my personal page, you see a lot of this stuff that I'm constantly putting up. Here we go. Bear with me. I do apologize. Man, there's way too much going on. Where is... Oh, okay. Well, now I'm understanding why certain things are happening. All right. Okay, let me shout out a few things before I play this clip. It's getting into position now. Shout out to Urban Apothecary, Dr. CD2, Leroy, Dardar, Dr. Thunder, Barry Little. I think most of those, Mr. Smith, Clay Bisbee, Better You. But also some of the newer ones. Shout out to Ghetto User in the house with the support. Much appreciation. Shout out to Norin. Appreciate that support. Shout out to David White. Appreciate that, supporting Black Male Media. Right. And shout out to SL. Says thank you for what you do. Appreciate that. You know. But all right, so let me pull this up. Now, this is clearly not an academic text, but I'm gonna show you. This is the difference between how men and women often function in terms of apology. Tell me if it's wrong. I don't need the music, but y'all can see what it is. Now, when I first looked at this, you know, I usually, I'm indifferent about this kind of stuff, but this one actually had me on the floor because almost word for word have I seen and experienced this. Right? Gives all the examples of everything done to deflect from an apology until it comes back to him apologizing for something she did. Again, comical on one level, truth and comedy on another. But we got videos telling us how we need to apologize, right? Shout out to AKs and Curtains. Appreciate that support. So again, when I talk about social solipsism or solipsism in general, what I'm referring to in the Gynocracy is this idea that the only person that is of relevance that exists often tends to be Black women. Maybe Black women and kids, right? But it rarely includes Black men. And part of the reason for that is because she can. So in that, you know, apology clip, all kinds of effort extended in terms of what's expected of us, the kind of emotional labor we got to perform to make them feel right, but very little accountability and very little that women have to do in regard to men. So that's one level. But now we're going to talk about disagreeableness and how on a social level within the Black community, it is acceptable for her to be disagreeable to the detriment of your peace of mind. And it's okay. It's only a problem if you become disagreeable. And again, we're really talking about family formation, but to this extent, I'm gonna show you some examples of the kind of disagreeableness I'm talking about and how it's acceptable. So let me go here. So here's another one. So this one has to do with this whole question of stressing men out and how much power some women get out of doing so. So check it out.
That your job was stressing you out, I'm gonna make sure I stress you out even more. If you can do this and go above and beyond for your job title, I'm gonna make you go above and beyond for me. I'm not gonna give you understanding. I'm not gonna give you this. And also, I'm gonna also continue to always remind you how much I also don't need you.
Preach it.
You're a plus. You're an afterthought. I can figure this out even if you wasn't here.
Can we let it breathe? The first person they're gonna bring it out on is not their best friend when they on the phone. It's not their parents when they call them. It's their man when he gets home from having a day. Crazy.
If you thought
completely okay, completely acceptable. Matter of fact, I'm gonna show you another way that stressing you out can take place. Check this out.
Mouth on her. My mother was, man, I grew up around a woman we didn't go to church. I didn't have a church going mama.
Okay.
Right? I mean, my mother was not that one. She was a young mama. She was a teenage mama. She liked to cuss. She cusses, all this stuff. But my mother has been married, she got married, she was married 3 times. And her last marriage was her most successful one. And what she told me was, when I got married, she said, don't cuss at your husband. She said, do your best to not cuss at your husband. I said, why not? And she said, you don't want him to cuss at you.
Right.
Right? And she said, so do your best to not, and try your best to stay a lady. Because
Right.
you want him to see you as a lady. You're not trying to get him to see you as your homeboy or his this and that, his homeboy, whatever. And so I try my best not to cuss now when you make me mad. My mama.
I notice basically what she's saying is it's going to come out, right? It's going to come out at some point. She's actively trying not to because she saw the mistakes her mother made. Her mother saw the mistakes she made while she was growing up, cussing at men in the house, so on and so forth. So even in taking her mother's lesson, she's still going to let you know it might happen anyway, as long as you piss her off. And in what relationship do 2 people not piss each other off at some point, right? But again, we're just kind of looking at social disagreeableness and how acceptable it is as long as she's the one being disagreeable. When you become disagreeable, even if you have a reason to be, that's when there's a relationship problem. But when she's the one that's disagreeable, it's completely acceptable. And as a matter of fact, how dare you take issue with this? Right? How dare you? I've had partners that got upset at the whole question of whether or not they should be able to cuss me out. That actually fought to retain the right to do so and be able to maintain a relationship on her terms. Actively arguing and trying to come up with logical points to make as to why I should accept being cussed out. But this is not just about me. I can't tell you how many brothers have been stressed out in relationships, argued with, cussed out, irritated, purposefully, especially when you're talking about women that enjoy it. But on a social and on a cultural level, I'm saying it goes beyond individual enjoyment. It demonstrates a power dynamic in the relationship. A power dynamic where she can do whatever she wants and walk over you, treat you like something off her shoe, and it's still acceptable. You're supposed to still be in her space and provide her all of the privileges and perks of being in a relationship. You are supposed to excuse her behavior because she doesn't have to be accountable for it. It's only a problem if you decide to do the same thing she's doing. Right? Shout out to Cameron. Appreciate that support. Peace to you as well. Right? Marcus, appreciate that support. But this is what we're talking about. And this is not something that just happens by happenstance. This is something that is often passed down. And it's really, and this is what I deal with in the book, a lot of this is policy based. The behavior that we're seeing online today is a product of generations of policy that has allowed for a one-way dynamic, a one-way power dynamic in the Black community. The only way we've been taught to see a power dynamic in terms of gender in the Black community is in terms of this patriarchy analysis. But it's used to obfuscate and bury under the table, under the rug, I should say, the power dynamic and social context that leaves Black women in positions of authority, especially as it pertains to having kids and custody of those kids, right? Having the state influence how the family functions, and the women that grow entitled as a product of this. This is partially what you're seeing in these behavioral clips. It's an entitlement that is a product of policy. And that policy has created a cultural response that has only been exacerbated over the years. Check this out. This is a young girl that I'm about to play. And it's not that she's saying anything that you'll see what I mean, but I want you to pay attention to her behavior and tell me what you see.
It's time for me to go outside. She probably over there went and got some cigarettes, and grandma probably got her some Mentos and some Pepsi. I don't know what she thinks she doing, cause I'm not finna watch these kids. Here come and get these kids, cause they not my kids. Period. I don't know what she doing. She better come on, don't snuck out that door. She better come on and get these kids, cause I'm not watching these kids. It's time for me to go outside. She probably over there went and got some cigarettes, and grandma probably got her some Mentos and some Pepsi. I don't know what she thinks she doing, cause I'm not finna watch these kids. Yeah, come home with these kids, but they not my kids. Period.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. This is how it gets passed down. This is what I meant. And I've been saying this for years now. These things are passed down in a very distinct way. Right. The mimicking of behavior. Right. Now, I'm not saying that she said anything particularly upsetting in this video. It's just the mimicking of behavior. Right. The posturing. And if she's getting this at this age, how do you think she is by the time she's in her 20s, 30s? How about 40s? How do you think she interacts with Black men? If she's able to mimic this, and I know that this is mimicking, and so do you, because you've seen it. You grew up with it. You can identify it. She didn't come up with this on her own. She didn't wake up one day and emulate this out of nowhere. This isn't even something that's emulated off of watching a television show. This comes from day-to-day contact with family and elders around her that operate this way. So when I talk about gynocratic behavior, this is how it's passed down from generation to generation. And if it's passed down this young and younger, right, we can see it. We can see how it begins to shape behavior, how it shapes expectations, how it shapes gender dynamics. And if you don't have men in the picture, because often men walk out of an environment filled with this behavior, she only learns how to do this with very little interaction with males. Maybe her brothers, but for the most part, fathers are withdrawing and have been for the last few decades, withdrawing from spaces filled with this type of behavior. In the 70s and 80s, they just began to refer to it as deadbeat dads. But then we found out statistically that dads try to stay in their lives and engage their children more than any other group of men. So then they had to figure out another way to explain it. Basically, Black men began to withdraw from spaces like this. And in many instances, they were pushed out anyway. I've even heard this, from close family members and friends of families. In instances where women wanted to maintain control and they could use the state to either control that man she was with or push him out the family altogether and then make him responsible for child support so that from a distance, he still has to maintain the structure she wants to function as it does in their family. And this passes down from generation to generation. This is the woman you meet 20 years later in a club. And you wonder why the dynamics are the way they are, right? This is being passed down, right? But let's talk about this whole question of, socializing sons for subservience. So let's talk about CompuServes. Where does it hail from? Well, it's very similar to what you just saw. Check this out.
And do you have any children? I got one son, as you heard. That's my man, my boyfriend. All that. How old is your son? 7. You call your son your boyfriend? I'm his first love. Shit, he up my ass like he right there. Look, that would make him. Wait, I'm talking. Go, come on. I'm not hollering. What you say? Well, wouldn't I just make him your son and not your man and your boyfriend? Listen, when you only got one child, you they first love. They own you like white on rice. They the gravy to your wife, your rice. So he just be all up in my. Yeah. I understand that, but that's because you're his mother, not because you're his girlfriend. Oh no! You taking it the wrong way, baby. No. They know what I'm saying. You going too far. Well, you don't want to say he's your man and your boyfriend. Yeah, that's because I'm his mother. That's my.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is on the daily. See, this is what happens when on a macro level, or at least it doesn't. If we talk about this on a societal level, if you're able to successfully remove men from a position of not necessarily even authority, remove them from a position of being able to weigh in on what is appropriate behavior in a family setting, if you can remove men from that equation to where they're not even in a position to weigh in and they're not able to check this kind of behavior on a day-to-day basis, there's nothing to stop her from doing this. And how do you think that young boy gets socialized after 20 years, after 18? What is he able to do? What is he able to contribute? What is his sense of self? What is his sense of role? What does he become acquainted with in terms of the social expectations of a man in a family, or at least in a couple, right? Where he's approaching a woman. What do you think this does to his worldview and his sense of self? Now, obviously, it doesn't need to be to this extreme a degree. But I think when you remove men from the family equation and you leave women in positions of authority backed by institutions and leave them in control of children with custody, these are the kinds of things that can happen, but they happen unchecked because men aren't supported. Right? This is a one-way dynamic that primarily supports her. So she does whatever she feels like doing. See, essentially what's happening with this boy is in a form of emotional incest. But at the end of the day, it pleases her to do it. And as long as it pleases her and there's nothing to check her from doing it, she'll do it. This is what partially produces some of the outcomes we've been seeing. This is one of the contributing factors, right, that contributes to this dynamic. This is what we see. Right? Shout out to Dapper Dons for showing support. Right? Ordering your book. Appreciate that. As for this topic, I'm mentally checked out. I'm trying to find. Okay. I've tried to find an FBA wife, really tried, got my passport and felt respected in Colombia and Thailand, felt peace. See? Because this is not something that is a case by case basis. Right? People want to individualize this stuff to too great a degree and say, well, you just haven't met the right one. No, this is a feature of the culture. This is what we see. It's a feature of the culture. I'm going to give you another example. And again, fair use for all of these. This one actually comes from a channel I respect. This comes from Pink Book Lessons. And in this particular clip, what she's talking about, it's not actually her. She actually recorded. Let me bring this up.
Yeah, they should, but I'm
okay. So this is a particular video, very recent, within the last week, where she's talking about, it's ultimately about a woman who was killed by one of her baby daddies. And I think she had like 3. And the latest one, who she had a child with, has just been arrested for what they believe. I think it's at this point, I don't know where the status of the case is, but I think it's alleged that he and somebody else did something to her, right? So she disappeared one night. Her car was burnt up. She was burnt up, or at least it took them a while to find her, and so on and so forth. Now, she had several kids, 3 or 4 kids from several different men. And the fathers were not interviewed in any of this, right? So the latest baby father is considered to be the possible murderer. The other baby fathers were attentive fathers, were participatory in their lives. Now, here's where it gets twisted, right? I think there are 4 boys altogether. And the young woman who was killed, her mother, the boy's grandmother, decided to take custody of all the kids, even though she had 3 baby daddies. So some of the other baby daddies are coming forward to say, no, we've been attentive. We've been participatory. We want our children. You don't get to take custody of them just because of the situation. So this is an interview with one of the fathers. And I'm just going to start it in the middle of the interview because it's actually what happens, in the course of this interview that I think is important when we're talking about a gynocracy. These kind of casual examples show you, how a gynocracy functions in the Black community. So again, fair use. Shout out to Pink Book. This is not a criticism of her because she's not even saying anything. She's just playing an interview where the young man who is pictured at the bottom in the middle, I believe, the father of 2 of the children, is trying to get custody of his kids from the children's grandmother, who's refusing to give up custody. So, let's listen to a little bit of this.
ever been, missing.
So what's standing in the way of you having them right now? Because when the mother is gone, then the next parent is the person who was supposed to have them. So shouldn't they be with you right now?
Yeah, they should, but I'm gonna let my mother speak for me on that one.
This is his mom. The issue that we're facing right now is that
now, just so you know, this picture is not the mother who's speaking. If I'm not mistaken, this is the woman here, I believe, who was actually killed, right? And if indeed her recent baby daddy did kill her, he's where he needs to be as far as that. But again, the person speaking a moment ago and the mother that got on the phone, these are the other baby. This is one of the other baby daddies who's actually been very participatory in his son's lives. And so when answering the question that Pink Book asks him about why he doesn't have custody, he defers to his mother. So let's let the mother continue a little longer.
Early on in their relationship, we had to go to court and legitimize the oldest child. And then when the second child was born, he was on the birth certificate, but in the state of Georgia, you have, which we did not know, you had to legitimize that child, even if your name is on the birth certificate as the dad. They can file child support against you if the name is on the birth certificate, but you as the dad really don't have parental rights or control.
Now, the thing about it is, the brother was well-spoken, fairly intelligent young man, understands the importance of being in his son's life and is doing what he needs to do to make sure he maintains a position there. But what I found interesting is in the middle of this interview with this clear, well-spoken, and apparently intelligent young man, is when he turns this mic over. Now, this is something that I've seen in a lot of different ways, especially as a teacher. Because remember, at the end of the day, I'm an old classroom teacher. I've been teaching at the university level for 25 years. Beyond that, I taught K through 12 before I began to teach. Matter of fact, at the same time, I was teaching college, right? And one of the things I noticed is in our community, it was readily expected for women to take over the conversation, women to be deferred to, because again, this is how we're socialized. We're socialized in this respect to prioritize her positioning. Fathers were rarely called in to speak on behalf of, the family or what's going on. And this has been the entirety of my lifetime. As a matter of fact, even with this case that we're talking about, that Pink Book has been covering, one whole major dynamic of this is the young woman who was killed. They interviewed the mother, they interviewed other people. They did not interview her father. And her father was the first one to say, my daughter is gone. My daughter has passed on. He was the first to say it. And when they finally found out that she was, they let him speak at the press conference, but they didn't interview him prior to that. And Pink Book covered it and pointed that out well. Shout out to her for that. Right? She pointed it out. But what I'm talking about is the positioning and who's allowed to speak for the family and who isn't. And the generations of young men who are socialized to follow this gynocratic structure. Now, I'm not saying in this instance it's a life-threatening emergency, but notice how casual that was and how reminiscent is it of what you've seen on a regular basis as far as who speaks on behalf of whom. Now, it's one thing if he's 7 years old and being interviewed by the news, that's one thing, but this is a grown-ass man who is advocating for custody of his kids in light of his baby's mother being murdered. And he's trying to get custody of those kids so he can raise his sons. He is speaking clear as day. And if you get a chance to check the interview, you'll hear it. Clear as day. And yet, for some reason, that there still needs to be a turning over of voice. Right? And this is something that also, I think it reminds me of also when you go to counseling, couples counseling, marital counseling, one of the things you tend to find happen, especially since the majority of counselors tend to be women. And if you're going for Black counselors, they tend to be Black women. And we've seen over the last couple of years, a number of cases of Black women counselors being extremely misandric in regard to Black male patients, right? Even their own patients in some instances. But when you talk about a coupling dynamic, going to see a counselor, it's interesting how smoothly and casually her voice becomes the priority in the meeting. And those of you who have been to couples counseling with a Black female counselor or a female counselor at that, you can attest to how often her voice becomes the priority of the subject, right? The priority in what the couple needs to heal, what the couple needs to move to the next level, often tends to be her needs. I can't tell you how many men have reached out to me over the last decade to tell me about how many experiences they've had of being silenced in these sessions, where it ends up becoming a 2-on-1 pile-on. And if he gets upset, that's an indication of how problematic he is. And if he leaves, it's an indication of how much he doesn't care about the relationship, but never any acknowledgement at his silencing. And most men are not going into those meetings prepared to be blindsided. They're going in good faith, trying to repair what's going on in their relationships. And his issues and concerns are downplayed, made second, if not tertiary, secondary or tertiary in terms of importance, but it's acceptable for her voice to be prioritized. So this is what I'm kind of referring to in that regard. And I talk about it in terms of being concuserves or being socialized to serve as sons to mothers, because that's where we learn the dynamic. That's where we first are introduced to Black Gynocratic superiority. That's where you're first introduced to the idea that as a Black male, you are lesser than in your own family. As a child, you learn this. This is how this kind of plays out, right? Now, there's another clip, but I'm going to play this. I'm going to do this one separately with BGS in another show. So we're going to cover this separately. But now we're going to talk a little bit about what I call excused violence. Excused violence. Let's see here. Let me remove this. Don't need this. I think this is one. Let's check this out. Okay. So if you weren't familiar, we're looking at a clip, right, of a young woman attacking a young man in class. And she's hitting him and she's beating on him. And somehow this is acceptable. This is okay. People are laughing. He even is he's backing away from her, but he's got a smile on his face. He's trying to keep things calm. She keeps swinging at him and she connects with him twice. He throws her, and then you hear a cacophony of voices. You see people moving to protect her. None of those people got up prior to that because it was perfectly acceptable for her to hit on him. It was perfectly acceptable. It didn't become a problem until he responded. And there's a lot of situations like this that go on. As a matter of fact, by the time you hear about it in a news report or an article where a man has been violent, there's never a question as to what led up to it, even if her violence initiated it, which statistically is quite common. This is what we're talking about when we say, and this is not this, we have no evidence as to whether or not this is intimate partner violence. This is, this is in a classroom setting. But what I'm saying here is that when violence is actually initiated by women, that doesn't make the conversation. The clock starts when he responds. It starts when he responds, the way this young man did, who got tired of it. He slammed her. And that's when it became an offense. Prior to that, everybody was laughing, women and male and female in the class, because I don't know their ages, right? Nobody made a move. Nobody sought to protect him. Nobody thought to hold her back. It was perfectly acceptable. And when she slapped him, the response was, ooh, because it was still entertaining. What happens when it's a pot of hot grits? A bowl of ground up glass put in his food, a baseball bat, a gun. It's still cute. Is that still cute then? Even if it's the father of her child, her husband, still cute? At some point, again, when we talk about accountability, this kind of excused violence has to be called into question. This socially acceptable violence on women's behalf that people act like can't cause you a problem needs to be called into question. And it needs to be dealt with. We are too casual about this type of excused violence. And sometimes we can even see it coming, and we still don't do anything about it. Now, this one is an older article, but I had not heard about it, and I thought it important for us to kind of look at and put into context. So if you're not familiar, this is actress Tasha Smith. And I think most of you know who she is. If you've seen, a number of different Tyler Perry projects, you've seen her, and you're somewhat familiar with her character: loud, boisterous, confrontational, argumentative, so on and so forth. Turns out that this might actually be very reminiscent of who she is in real life. So this article, entitled Tasha Smith, Court Ordered to Stay 2 Yards Away from Her Husband. Husband says the Why Did I Get Married star has threatened to kill him. All right? Tasha Smith. Now, this article is a couple years old. I think few years old. I don't see where they put it. Oh, it's 2020. For some reason, it changed the size of it. Let's see if that. Well, it's coming out in the middle of the screen for some reason. I'm not sure why. But anyway, this is what it is. So this came out in 2020. And it says the actress has been ordered to stay 2 yards away from her husband, Keith Douglas, I think it is. It's kind of overwritten here, the date. I apologize. It says outside the home, Smith must remain at least 100 yards away, and inside the home, 2 yards away from her husband. According to Douglas, Smith often flies into an alcohol-fueled rant and rages where she threatened to kill him and sometimes warned him to not fall asleep or something will happen. He even claims she's threatened him in front of their children. Sources close to Smith, who currently stars in Tyler Perry's For Better or Worse, say the accusations of her alcohol abuse are ridiculous and that she has no such issues with alcohol. Okay. People thought she was playing a role. Most brothers looked at this and said, nah, that's not a role. Yeah. Black and Blue TV says that Tasha Smith is who she is on and off camera. Yeah. Close enough to shoot. Yeah. This is what we talk about. See what I mean? And the thing about it is, this is not just Tasha. We've seen this from a variety of women. And it's okay. The reason I think it can occur like this is because it's excused. It's acceptable. Right? But black men are under such a constant state of surveillance that if you do act up in any kind of way, you are immediately called into the authorities, or you have to answer to the public of the court of public opinion. If your behavior is this out of pocket, even if it doesn't get to the police or to a court, it definitely, you get responded to. Now, this is 3 years old. This happened in 2020. At what point did we see a major movement to call her behavior into question? Anybody? Don't worry, I'll wait. Because this is acceptable. This is excused violence, even if it's emotional violence. But it's also a threat of physical violence, and more than that, a threat of murder. But it's laughable because it's a woman, right? Till she does it. And here's the twist. If she does it, then it becomes a question of, well, I wonder what he did. I wonder what he did to upset her. I wonder what he did to hurt her. He probably cheated on her. Somehow, in the minds of many people, right, cheating is grounds for murder. I can't tell you how many, and on my show, how many black men whose stories I've told based on articles and even video clips, men who've been murdered. And the first response I hear from many people is, he probably cheated on her. Low key, he deserved it. Or I wonder what he did to piss her off. But if a man is this outraged, he's toxic and he just has a problem. And he needs counseling. He needs jail. Hell, more often than not, if it's a black male, it ain't even that he needs counseling. He needs prison. That's the response given. Let's see. Firebrand Central says Iona Van Zant is guilty of the same thing when it comes to counseling black males. Okay. Yeah. TJR says her art imitates her life. How many were indoctrinated with this behavior through her work? Yes. Now, we already saw the little girl earlier. We know that these are the types of practices that can get handed down, but you're obviously correct. When it comes to media exposure, these kind of women are celebrated, right? Think about the film Girls Trip, right? Which character did most women articulate publicly that they either identified with or just really loved? Was it the rational, calm women having conversations about their feelings and their relationships? Which one was it? Who was the comedian that embodied the person in Girls Trip that was the most rowdy, talking mess, threatening to hurt people? Which character did they resonate with most? Right? Yeah. Thank you, Cox. Tiffany Haddish. Tiffany Haddish played the Tasha Smith of Girls Trip, which she does in a lot of different movies she's in. And this is what people resonate with. This is what people are drawn to, because of course the target audience for those kind of movies are black women. But when you listen to black women themselves talk about which characters that resonate with them in these kinds of productions, it's Tasha Smith, Tiffany Haddish. You know why? And this is to quote BGS, because those are the women that get those black men told. They like that. Those black women get those black men told. If you think about the film Fences with Denzel Washington, right? The scene that most people rave about first is when Rose tells Denzel's character Troy off. I don't know why I'm blanking on her name. Actually, I think she's a talented actress. I don't particularly like a number of her movie choices, but her name, I'm blanking on her name right at this moment. I can see her face in my head, but damn it. What's her name? Viola. Thanks, Cox. You're on it. Cox got my back today. Appreciate that, right? Viola Davis, yeah. When you talk about Fences, the first scene that resonates with people is Viola Davis, right? Her character Rose, getting Troy told, right? You think about Will Smith playing, the father of, right, two tennis greats. Y'all know what it is. I wasn't planning on talking about it, so I'm blanking. But Venus and Serena's father, right? The scene that everybody talks about most, that they love to see, is when the mother, the wife in that movie, gets to tell him off, right? She gets him told in the kitchen. This is what resonates. Even going back to The Color Purple, right? Whoopi Goldberg finally tells him off. Until you do right by me, right? This is the culture. They love to see black men get told. He has to get told. Well, Tasha Smith became the face of that for a little while. Tyler Perry's work, and people loved it. But when that shit carried off screen, nobody had anything to say. This man is literally with a woman who's telling him she's going to kill him. But for some reason, it's acceptable because it's Tasha. It doesn't mean anything. But here's the thing. Even if she doesn't actually act on it, how is this translated to the children that have been hearing her scream and cuss at him maybe their entire lives? How does that translate? Well, we already saw how that translates. We saw what that does. But don't get it twisted. It can go further than that. Hold on. All right? It can go further than that. This is an interesting one here. lawandcrime.com. This is August 12th, 4 days ago. Right? Woman accused of shooting Uber driver, leaving him to die in the street, and taking his Toyota Prius to visit family, smoke pot, and get hair done. Word. This is what's happening. Right? 18-year-old woman is accused of randomly walking up to an Uber driver and father of two and fatally shooting him before taking off in his Toyota Prius and leaving him to die on the street in downtown Seattle. Niana Allen Bailey was arrested Thursday in the killing of Amari Gaeta, who police said died near First Avenue South and South Walker Street around 3:30 a.m. Tuesday. Suspect was being held at the King Country Correctional Facility with bail set at $2 million. Online jail booking records show. A court hearing was set for Tuesday. It was unclear Saturday whether she had a lawyer. Citing court documents, ABC Seattle affiliate published details about the arrest, including the suspect's alleged statements to investigators about shooting Gaeta during a physical altercation and her alleged story about driving the victim's Prius for 2 days. 2 days around the Seattle area, visiting her family in Skyway, smoking marijuana in Rainier Beach, getting her hair done in Kent, and gassing the car up for $20 at a car wash in Renton. Now, you guys tell me, have you seen this splattered over every news media channel? Has this become representative of all black women in the sense that in the public eye, this is somehow how black women are? Because this is the case with black men. If this were a black man that shot a woman, drove around, it would be it's standard news, and it would be received as a testament to who black men are effectively. But this kind of stuff happens. This is what I mean when I talk about excused violence. This is excused. This is acceptable. Right? Not only that. Right? Where'd it go? There it is. Now, y'all are probably more familiar with this person than I am. Right? But 4 days ago, we had another article come out. Sexy Red Pistol whipped her baby daddy after looking through his phone. Sexy Red pistol whipped her baby daddy after looking through his phone. Right? And she talked about it in social media. And was frustrated that she said he tried to fight back. I went through my baby daddy phone. He talking to something, right? She told the We in Miami podcast. She says, I whooped his ass. We be fighting for real, I swear to God. He trying to fight back. Like me and my baby daddy, we upped our Glocks on each other before. She says, that's real toxic. I hit him in the mouth with my Glock. He was hella mad. I just had that experience before I came down here. But it's acceptable violence. Acceptable often by the men who've been socialized to accept it, because we're told that female initiated violence is just, it's not a threat. It's not a problem. If you're a real alpha, you'll ignore it. Word. That's how that works. Okay. But this is acceptable. This is okay. This is what people deal with on a regular basis. And it's only a problem, as she even said, when he, quote unquote, tried to fight back. Right? That's when it's a problem. That's when it's a problem. So whether we're talking about the kind of solipsism I pointed out, the disagreeableness, right, the concuserfdom, the excused violence, these are all practices, right, within the gynocracy that are acceptable if you've been raised in it. And now, for the first time, you have black men in a collective sense starting to raise questions about whether or not they should even receive this, if they should stay in the midst of having to deal with all of this. This is the first time in my lifetime I've seen this many black men raise up questions about whether or not they should have to deal with it. Yeah. It's Jermaine's fault, right, cowboy? This is what we're looking at. This is what's supposed to be acceptable. So let's get to it. I wanted to foreground a lot of that so that by the time we actually get here to Terence Bud Crawford, we can have the context that I've been referring to prior to this. Let me see. Picture is not there. I don't want them to play video though, but crap. There we go. All right. So Terence Bud Crawford, right? Here we go. So this is CBS News. This is dated August 9th. Now, I wanted to play some of the video clips, and I think, actually, you know what? I think I will. I think I do have it. I think I do. It's just a question of where I put it. Where'd it go? There we go. Fair use.
I'm all to me.
Let's try and get some of this up so we can actually look at it. I forgot about this one. This is actually coming from the actual documentary itself. So let's see if we can get some of this.
It came from.
So here we go.
All to me is home. I think that's where all the pain came from. When I go down to the neighborhoods that I grew up in,
that just remind me and reflect back off where I came from.
3169 Larimore Street. Take me back to your block.
And that's where it all started at. Me going in the street, putting on the gloves, me fighting in the alleys. Just a typical bad kid running the neighborhood.
What did you say when he was born?
I remember he came out with his hands balled up. Son, the son I wanted. His dad said we got $1 million baby boy.
My dad used to tell my mom I was gonna be a world champ.
Now let's stop right there. Shout out to Tyrone for the contribution. Coming out the womb, the story starts with him saying that his father says he's going to be a champion, right? His father is attempting to breathe life into him early. Let's see what else happens.
Told me we won't be.
I'll rewind it.
Gonna be a world champ.
I told me we won't be.
Terence's father, your husband, shipped out. So now you're here with 3 kids. What was that like for you?
If Bud was around the corner fight, somebody gonna come and tell me. I'll go around and get him, snatch him up, and bring him home.
And
he know what time it was.
he got whooping.
He sure did.
What kind of whooping?
An ass whooping with a belt.
Tell me about Deborah and Terence. It's a complicated relationship.
Man, you know, she has her own ways to motivate her son. She has her own way of loving her son. But they love each other, man. They're 2 peas in.
That's love, though, right? That's how we love each other. The father says he's going to be a champion. The mother says he ain't going to be shit. Now, they just say the father shipped out. See, these are interesting to me. The way they kind of give these father narratives in these stories, he just shipped out. He just disappeared. Right? Really? I mean, I can't speak to this particular situation as far as what went on between the father and the mother, but you tell me. Right? Anyway.
The pot together.
You kept telling him, "Are you never going to amount to anything?" Did you really believe it?
Some things that I said to him, I wanted him to be a man. And don't be afraid of nobody.
That's a hard lesson to learn. You're 12, 13.
Yeah, but he had to learn it.
How'd that make you feel?
It filled me with rage. And every time I stepped foot in the ring or anything that I ever did, I just wanted to win so bad so I can prove a point to her.
How'd you think he'd do?
He did good because he was around here beating up everybody in the neighborhood. I paid the kids, I said, if y'all can whoop Bud, I give y'all $10 a piece. Couldn't whoop him.
You went out on the street.
Yeah.
What's now Bud Crawford Street.
Yeah.
And offered $10 to anyone who can kick my son's butt.
Yep.
And a lot of takers.
Yeah,
no
kids
one
in
could
the
do it.
neighborhood. Couldn't nobody whoop him.
What did he tell you then?
He told your mom, I told you I'm the best.
What came first, the mean or the talent?
I think the mean came first. When I first started boxing, I just could fight. I couldn't box. All my coaches was like, he got heart. He ain't scared of nothing, he can fight. That's when they started teaching me technique and the art of boxing.
A good deal of what you remember in your childhood was you getting whooped all the time by your mom.
And I was getting kicked out of school and doing bad things. I think getting whooped, that just made me immune to pain.
Explain that to me.
Well, I was always getting in trouble. So I was always getting a whooping for something. So at a point in time, it just became numb to me. Well, it ain't gonna hurt. It ain't nothing but a belt or something.
First time it hurt, though.
It became numb to me. You know how long something has to happen before it becomes numb to you? Right? This is without question emotional abuse. But the aspect of this that I'm interested in is how Black men and boys adapt to this in an environment where women have control of the family as backed by the state. How do Black boys and men adapt? They again perform what I call men's relationship emotional labor. he learned to translate her abusive behavior, which was in and of itself a product of dysfunction, a product of abuse, a product of trauma, more than likely. But he took it upon himself to learn how to translate her abusive behavior into something motivational. But I would still argue is more than likely emotionally damaging to himself. But he still learned how to operationalize it in some kind of way. This is how he had to adapt to a set of behaviors from his own mother that he should not have had to deal with. Right? But this is the labor he performs, and somehow now it becomes some kind of testament to her strength and tough love that she made him into a champion. So even in that, he's robbed of the agency of becoming the goddamn champion. Her abuse, he became the champion in spite of, not because of. He learned to translate it into something else. But you can't tell me that he's still not traumatized on one level or another. I don't give a damn if the outcome is a championship. That has nothing to do with his own mental well-being. That just means he made good in the boxing ring. What do you think happens to the majority of people who are raised with this type of trauma and dysfunction? Do they become champions? CEOs? Is that what happens? Is the subtext to this story that all black boys need is some abuse in order to perform well and rise to the occasion to become something completely... Stop it. Stop it. I credit him with what he had to do in an environment that was hostile to him. But this is abuse. And he shouldn't have had to endure it. And it isn't to say he couldn't have become champion without being abused. If he had the wherewithal to take that venom and turn it into something that motivated him, he had the wherewithal to find a different motivation to accomplish the same ends. I don't want to hear this bullshit that she somehow made him a champ. No, she abused him. And somehow it becomes common practice to point out how abused and traumatized she likely was based on her own life experiences. And even he will defend her along those lines. But when it comes to fathers, whether good or bad, their own upbringings are irrelevant to the story. How many times have y'all seen since the 1960s, fathers sacrifice their lives to make sure their sons and daughters become A-list athletes and they become a footnote to their children's stories? How many black men have led their children to success from music to sports and they become abusive footnotes? When's the last time you saw Joe Jackson heralded as the source of his kids' success and his hard love? No, they talk about him as a monster and an abuser. He's not credited in that way. He's a monster. Because as a black male, that's all he can be. He couldn't have been a genius, Tiger Woods' father, the Venus sisters. Hell, in the movie they did about the Venus sisters, it's supposed to be a celebration of his contribution, even though I don't think they were talking to him at the time. But beyond that, it just became a story about people waiting for him to get told.
Yeah, I was a little kid.
And at some point, the whooping stopped.
Yeah, I wasn't having all that.
He was 13 when he said, Mom, you're not gonna whoop me no more. He took the belt from me.
See, the whoopings didn't stop because they shouldn't have been happening or because she found a more effective way to get his attention and get him going in the right direction. They stopped because he demanded they stop. And most black men can remember the last whooping, right? You remember that point where you finally got to a point where it didn't hurt that much, not like when you were little. And you knew you could bench press your mother. Now, most brothers I talk to can remember that moment, right? Now, with my own son, there was a point where I was able to finally talk to him. We got to a point where I could express disappointment and he would take it and reorient his thinking. When he was real little, yeah, he got a little behind popped every now and again, but it never got crazy. It didn't have to. I wasn't abusing my son. And it was very early on when all I needed to do was talk to him. There was a point where he was too young for that, but I think about, maybe like 7. I could look at him and he would cool out and we could have a conversation. But often in our community, our disciplinary tactics really hail from slavery. When you look at your great-grandparents and your grandparents and the methods they used to use, particularly in the South, they get real intricate about switches, and sometimes they would get multiple switches and they braid them up and whip you. It was deep. It was deep. But some of our tactics came out of a lot of years, a lot of generations of, dysfunction, and some still do it to this day. And they didn't stop because she decided they should stop because he was old enough to think for himself. They stopped because he required that they stop. Here we go.
I grabbed the belt and told her, you ain't about to hit me no more. Oh, that's out the window. I ain't getting whooped no more.
Did that change you?
No. I think I got more respect, from my mom.
You once told me I was fighting for her approval, for her to tell me she was proud or happy, but she never would, so I stayed angry. Explain that to me.
When she always telling you you're gonna lose, or you're not good enough, or you're gonna get your ass kicked, or things like that, it's like, okay. When I win this tournament, she gonna say congratulations, or good job, or I'm proud of you. But it never happened.
See? So here we're talking about, this is the 7th area. We've talked about solipsism, disagreeableness. We've talked about concuserfdom. We've talked about excused violence. Oh, I'm sorry, this is the 5th area. My bad. The 5th area, right? Withholding of affection, right? So not only is she paying kids around the neighborhood to beat her son up, not only is she beating him, right? But she's withholding affection. And somehow this is a tough love that he needed, right? This helped make him champion. This is abuse.
He remembers is all those years wanting for you to say,
I love you.
Yes.
Yep. Yes.
And you didn't do it.
Nope. I grew up not liking the word. Why? I don't know. Never liked the hugs growing up as a kid. I never liked nobody to kiss me growing up as a kid, and it just grew with me as I got older.
She hated that word. She said love is pain. Her support was in a different type of way, it was in a negative way, but when I got older, I noticed that it was her negative way that pushed me to be great.
You're still trying to prove.
See, that's what I mean when I say he learned how to reframe it for his benefit. 1, he shouldn't have had to, but 2, this wasn't something that actually tends to work across the board. Most of the time, it just causes more damage. And I don't think he's void of damage just because he became champ. We usually associate outside success with internal success, and I don't think those two always go together. You can trip up and become famous and do something well, but that doesn't mean you're well, especially if this is what you've grown up off of. Shout out to Black Uru. He says, this sounds like she was training a deadly pit bull terrier. Real talk. Shout out to Dr. Neil in the building. Hope you're well, good brother. Dr. Neil, as I put up earlier, he said he's only telling a fraction of the story. Absolutely. See, this is a different type of emotional labor. He's softening the story. You can't tell me he's not. And why? He's protecting his mother. He's protecting his mother from public critique, public criticism. Because how else is she going to come across? People are going to hate her. What is he doing? He's protecting his mother, despite it all. And I agree with Dr. Neil. He's only given us a portion of the story. But I shout him out. I mean, I support, I like how, you'll see how he's doing with his own kids and whatnot. I shout him out as a man. But in terms of abuse, I would say, yeah, there's a lot of need for therapy.
Something to your mom?
No, I think I already did all that. I proved stuff to myself now.
You're a father to 5. You never miss a game, an appointment, any of that, even when you're here in camp. Why?
That's my responsibility, is to be there as their father. You can't get those moments back.
Why do you think being a father is so important?
Because his dad wasn't around like he's around his kids.
When my child grow up, they gonna always remember, yeah, Dad was always in training camp. Dad was always on the road with boxing and the events, but Dad ain't never missed no birthday. Dad ain't never missed anything important. Dad was always there. And that's what they're gonna always remember.
Your mom ever tell you what a good father you are?
Yeah, she said it before. Yeah, she said, Bud, a great dad. And I always check, I say, I'm a great father. It's the difference.
Would you be Terence Crawford, the champion we know, if it weren't for that dynamic with you and your mom?
I think she just put the little extra fire, you know, on top of the fire that I already had.
You made him champion.
He made himself champion. I'm just proud of him because he's my son.
Now, I credit her with that. She gave him credit for what he did. But even the documentary itself tried to imply that she was the reason behind it, right? And the idea being that this is what's necessary. This is the tough love Black men need. Dysfunction. No. He needed affirmation. But he turned her dysfunction into affirmation best he could. He turned it into a fuel that he could use. But that in and of itself is not necessarily a healthy way to go about it. It was just the only way available to him. And he did well with it, and I salute him for that. But again, this is a recipe for disaster if we learn from this that this is not only acceptable, but this is more than acceptable, that this is desired, right? That this should be the dynamic we look for, where boys are withheld from affection, from love. That the method for raising successful Black men is to make sure that they are without affirmation and love. And that seems to be the message that I see in the public as far as this is concerned, because his most recent bout on top of that, right, comes out on top. I saw this documentary a year ago, and I commented on Facebook about it a year ago, but somehow it came back up in light of his most recent victory. And all of a sudden became the reason behind it that people were initiating. And I don't think he pushed this dynamic, because you could see him, he would reword it when they would try to pose it that way. He was trying not to go there, but at the same time, he was trying to protect his mother. This is the kind of emotional labor that men perform. Remember earlier when I was telling you about being everywhere from 9 to 17 years old, and the police would stalk me, throw me over the hood, put me on the ground no matter what I was wearing, pat me down, go through my stuff. And they would do it sometimes in front of other groups of people or in front of the school or whatever. It was a regular kind of thing, right? The reason I didn't tell my mother wasn't because I was afraid. Hell, I didn't do anything wrong. There wasn't nothing for me to be afraid about. I didn't tell her because I was performing a form of emotional labor for her. Because I didn't want to stress her out. I didn't want to worry her. I didn't want to bother her. And I'm not saying she did anything wrong in my story. What I'm saying to you is men and boys especially, but men, we also learned how to perform a very particular type of emotional labor. And I'm really talking about Black men. Men do it, boys do it in general. But in our community, we're dealing with very specific issues. And I think Black boys and men learn how to provide these types of emotional labor to no fanfare, to no acknowledgement, so much so that people don't even believe it happens. People don't even believe it exists. This is why when you sit down with your wife and a counselor and they start talking about emotional labor, what they mean is how often she has to pick up around you at the house, or how often she has to deal with your lack of emotional vocabulary, or how she has to endure you. But there's no frame of reference for the type of emotional labor you perform for her, for mothers, for wives, for sisters, for girlfriends. There's no language for it, because at the end of the day, they don't believe it exists. And then if they'll tell you that it exists, they'll tell you to use the language they've already provided, which is so generic and watered down. But whenever you actually hear it being used, it's always about what women endure for men. So there is still effectively not a language for your experience. So this is why I called it male relationship emotional labor. I titled it that way for a specific reason, because there needs to be conceptual space for males to articulate at any age, in any class setting, and in the environment, the nature of their emotional labor to those around them. And it's not just limited to women. We perform very distinct types of emotional labor for children. We provide very distinct types of emotional labors for communities, for families in general. John Henryism is not an accidental term when it comes to Black men. The steel-driving man that sacrifices his life to accomplish this particular goal, which in a larger setting is usually about taking care of family. Men who spent decades doing menial jobs that broke their bodies and their minds to provide for families. And often those families don't even remember their first fucking name. And they die providing houses, providing resources. But the only discussion you'll get about that dude is how he had another woman at one point in time, had a kid out of wedlock. And this becomes a permanent indictment on whoever this man was. And he's not even remembered in his own family outside of grandpa. But don't nobody want to talk about how the fact that he might have had to raise a child that wasn't even his, and he might have known it. And we don't talk about those things because criticism is only really acceptable when it comes to men. This is the kind of internalized misandry that we support and accept in the Black community, most particularly. We remember Big Mama. There is no Big Daddy. Papa, he was around for a while, but he was a Rolling Stone. Word, is that all he was? Or might there have been a reason why things played out the way they did? Right? But again, that's not part of the conversation. Conversation is a one-way dynamic where he has to hold all the criticism, she has to hold all the praise. If you try to give some of the praise to Black men, you're immediately accused of being toxic and being misogynistic. If you try to criticize Black women, you're immediately told you're being misogynistic and toxic. But as long as you compliment Black women or avoid criticism at all, it's acceptable. And if you support the criticism of only men and boys, it's acceptable. See, this is the reason I talk about the gynocracy, is we have tried and used every ideological framework possible to analyze the Black situation. We've dealt with it in terms of race, color, class. We've dealt with it in terms of geography, skin tone. Every framework you can think of. From Black Marxism to revolutionary nationalism. We've dealt with it from conservatism to atheism. Every framework we have used to analyze the Black situation. You want to know the only one we've avoided? Critically analyzing the role of women in the state and how that impacts the formation and the functioning of the Black family. That's the one we're not allowed to talk about. Last year, I think it was, I went on to a Black nationalist channel. I was invited to participate in a discussion, not a debate, a panel discussion. And the question was something along the lines of, if something can we criticize Black women? Are Black women responsible for X, Y, and Z? I forget the exact title. One of the things I noticed that happened throughout the entire discussion is that the discussion kept shifting back to criticizing men. Even in this discussion. Now, apparently they had a couple of lead-up shows that were about criticizing men, most of them turned out to be about criticizing men. But when we actually got to the conversation where the show was about criticizing women, each of the panelists would keep participating and shifting it back to criticizing men. And it got to a point where all I did in the discussion is say, the fact that this keeps shifting back to men tells you how ill-equipped we are to criticize women. And we can't move past criticizing women to looking at the real issue is in terms of her relationship with the state and what that spawns in her behavior over generations. We can't get to that because as soon as the criticism is levied, it's dismissed. It's dismissed as nothing but misogyny. And as long as the thought process is stifled at that point, it's going to look like misogyny, and that's going to be the end of the discussion. And people will swear that if you even so much did it or attempted to do it, you just hate women. This is one of the things that I've already heard about my book, that both me and my book is all about a hatred of women. Oh, and folks ain't even read it. But why should I expect any different? Hell, I still see people talking shit about Tommy Curry's The Man Not, and ain't even read it. And it's been out for years, right? But this is the idea. We've tried every method known to understand our situation and form solutions based off our understanding. But here's the problem. If you try to create a solution based off of an inaccurate or faulty understanding of the problem, the solution doesn't work. Now, I spend the majority of my time talking about the gynocracy. And I'm not doing it because I'm saying it's the only problem in Black America. I'm doing it because it's the missing part of the puzzle. No solution you develop is going to work, because here's the thing. Every solution you can think of to uplift any given community is going to come down to family. Every ideology you have is going to come down to family. But if the fundamental problem starts at the family and relationship level, no fucking solution is going to work. And if you want to dance around one of the most pivotal aspects to Black family formation, then get mad because the solutions you propose don't work, you just keep going in circles. The missing part of the conversation has to be added to the equation. I'm not saying Black women just woke up one day dysfunctional. We got all kinds of shit impacting Black men, Black women, boys, girls, LGBT, you name it. There's all kinds of issues, and many of them are justified. There's rationale behind it. But if you're going to take a few demographics, remove them from critique, and ignore the institutional relationship they have with institutions that are hostile to Black men, and then wonder why none of this shit works, and then more than that, wonder why so many young people don't want to participate in your ideological solution, because they're seeing how it doesn't work. It doesn't work, not because it in and of itself has no merit, whatever idea you're trying to propose. I don't care if it's a religious solution, a political solution, a cultural solution, as long as you're dancing around, what do they call that, the elephant in the room? What makes the gynocracy a problem is it's not naturally formed. It is a product of policy, and it exacerbates behavior, negative behavior rooted around ideas of Black female superiority. It's become a cancer. And as the resources and institutions are being withdrawn that have been so common, particularly for Black women, going back damn near to World War II, but we can talk about different levels of it, different types of it for much longer than that. As those resources are finally starting to be withdrawn, now you're starting to see the different type of dysfunction. You guys noticing an uptick in the last 5 years of women coming into male spaces, newly formed male spaces where men are finally starting to talk about their own issues? They're starting to come in. And the first response is often not to listen. It's to start shit. It's to troll. It's to fight, because she got to get you back under mommy's thumb, as BGS would put it. Because the fact that you're no longer accepting her dysfunction is inconceivable. You need to shut up and take it. You need to get back in line, not raise questions, and damn sure not criticize me, or mama, as it were. And I'm not just talking about mothers. I'm talking about the Black feminine idea that has become rooted in the gynocracy. If you're not willing to, if you're willing to critique it, there's going to be a problem, because she's not equipped to deal with that. She's not had to deal with it. But as resources start to get withdrawn, she's starting to realize what women all around the world know. In these situations, you need community, you need family, you need men. And if you discarded them and told them you didn't need them, they wasn't shit. I mean, this is not even his wife. This is his mother, Terence Crawford's mother. What did she say? He ain't gonna be shit. The grown-up equivalent of that in a man's life is a woman who says, I don't need you for shit. But this idea, and I talked about this in the Rebecca Lynn Pope video I did. Rebecca Lynn Pope is talking about a very small subset of well-to-do Black women. And this is the group that we assume that represents the majority, right? The six-figure earning Black women that you see in high restaurant and in high-cost restaurants, right? Where 6 of them are sitting together in their red bottoms and, the Mercedes outside. And somehow this becomes the idea of where Black women are. And as Rebecca Lynn said at one point, they're running circles around Black men, but that's not true. There's a smaller sample of six-figure earning Black women than there are Black males. They're even smaller. And somehow they become the face of Black womanhood. No, that's not it. Majority of Black women are struggling. They really are. But they've been brainwashed through popular media and simultaneously through what's being handed down in families to believe they're fundamentally better than their men and that they don't need their men until other groups of women find their men. You know, it's like a kid on Christmas that didn't like the red bike they got, tossed it to the side, and came back home and saw another kid playing on that bike and having a ball. You know what a kid's gonna do? Kick that other kid back, take the bike back, have fun with it for 2 minutes, and then as soon as that kid is out of sight, toss it to the side again. That's what the fuck we're dealing with. That's how black men are being seen and treated. And boys as well. This is what's going on with it. And creative forces, least Mercedes. Exactly. You know? Let's see. Let me see if there's any more of this I want to play. Here we go. Okay. No, that's it. All right. I called it pretty much right there. Let me remove this. So what we have with this current boxing champion is a man who's actually learned how to utilize an abusive behavior, right? And use it for his benefit. But I wouldn't recommend this as an ideal recipe for black boys. Because fundamentally what he was doing was trying to figure out a way to make acid consumable. And I think he did so well enough to accomplish in life and to do well with his own family. But just like the analogy, I would not argue that acid hasn't eaten away at him inside. I'm extremely ecstatic for what he's achieved, and I hope he's able to maintain that. And I hope he's able to deal with the stuff that's not being talked about in this documentary. But do not get it twisted. Shout out to the man. Appreciate that support. Do not get it twisted. Do not get it twisted. This is a exploitive, dysfunctional behavior. I'm glad to see the functional relationship that Terence or Bud Crawford has been able to develop with his own family, with his own career. Beautiful to see. More often than not, though, and I'm not saying this is going to happen with him. I truly hope the brother lives his life, the rest of his life, the way we think he's living it. I truly hope that's the case. But what we tend to see in a lot of situations with this is that dysfunction comes out somewhere if it's not resolved. And I'm not saying he didn't get it resolved. I hope he did. But usually that level of dysfunction comes out somewhere. And the ill part about it is people can't wait to call black men out on their dysfunction. And they won't talk about where it comes from. If you try to point out how R. Kelly was violated by his own sister sexually when he was a kid, people will cuss you out because you're only supposed to talk about what he did to women. You're not supposed to talk about where it came from. But if a woman is violating men or boys, then all of a sudden we got to have long conversations about how she's been traumatized, right? That's that gynocratic framework. It has to prioritize her. It has to be something that makes women feel good. If it holds women accountable or makes them responsible for something, it's a problem. It's toxic. But I do want to point out one other thing to you. This is not limited to the Bud Crawfords. This is actress Kenya Moore talking about her relationship with her mother. Check this out.
Like all of the adversity that came my way dealing with my mom, who could have easily destroyed me. Like literally, she told me she would destroy me to my face.
Your mother said that to you?
My mother said that to me. She said, I will dog you for the rest of your life, to my face.
How old were you?
I was about, I had to be, that was when I was hiding in my mother's closet. I had pre-recorded something because she wouldn't talk to me, and I was trying to get her to speak to me. And my cousin and I, we pre-recorded on the little tape cassettes, and I hid in her closet of my grandmother's home, her mom, hoping that when she came home, I could just press play, she would listen. And I poured my heart out, like just saying, you don't have to speak to me. You don't have to, we don't have to be friends. You don't have to call me your daughter, but can you at least speak to me, acknowledge me, let's try to have a friendship. And when she came home, my cousin buried me in the closet, you know, like put all the clothes, things. So I was hidden in her closet. And when she came home, I remember my heart was just beating out of my chest. And I think it was around 11, 12, I think. And she came in, she figured out what was going on. She was like, who is there? You know, she opened the closet door. She pulled all the clothes and things off of me, grabbed me out of there, took the recording, and she was livid. She was livid. My grandmother was home. It was her mom. And she told me, you know, I don't have a daughter. She pretended like, you know, I didn't exist, but she was livid. She had a conversation with my grandmother, her mom, and she told her mother to her face, I've never had a child. She was like, I've never had a child. And my grandmother, for the first time ever in my life, I saw her take up for me. Like, why can't you just speak to her? Why do you have to treat her that way? And my mother was like, I've never had a child. I don't know what you're talking about. They were arguing, and I just remember crying. My cousin was crying. And after she was done speaking to my mom, her mother, she came to me and she said, I will dog you for the rest of your life. She was like, I will never be your friend. I will dog you I will never forget those words. And that was, you know, after that, I think it just left me feeling like that's the end of it, you know? That was the end of it. And I don't know what happened to me, but over time, I think I just developed like this thick skin that said, I'm going to show her wrong. Like, you're not going to destroy me. And she tried everything that she could try. I remember the first pageant later that I ever won. It was called I'm going to get this wrong. Miss Black Star was my first one, Little Miss Black Star, and then the second one, I can't remember the name right now because I'm getting old. I can't remember.
You look good though, bitch.
Yeah. The mind. Okay. The microscope is not as.
Yeah, I'm not doing this because I have any great love for Kenya Moore. I barely know who she is. I mean, I know according to Wikipedia, she's been in Real Housewives of Atlanta. She was Miss USA 1993. You know what I mean? She was in Waiting to Exhale, Deliver Us from Evil, Steve Harvey, Girlfriends. I ain't seen her in none of those. I don't know who she is. But I can say in terms of her early life, you know, she talks about having been raised by her paternal grandmother and aunt after her mother abandoned her at 3 days old. Right? So this is trauma. And I'm just pointing out how the trauma we're talking about, you know, in many ways impacts both girls and boys, but we don't hear about how it impacts boys, you know, and it gets to the point where, you know, criticizing the culture and the family structure and the institutions that undergird it is just a no-no. You're just supposed to accept it. I'm gonna let her finish her clip and we'll go from there.
The mind is a terrible thing to waste, bitch, and it's still there.
Yes, it is definitely failing me at times. But I remember it was so crazy because I remember I won my second pageant. So I was 16. And that pageant, you didn't have to reveal your age. So the first one you did, I was 13 or 14. So the second one I entered, I won. And I was dating someone in high school that was very wrong, but he was a predator. 11 years my senior. So I was 16.
He wasn't a student?
As 27. He was 27 years old.
He was a faculty member.
He was a predator who followed me home from school, which a lot of the boys, because I looked so much older, you know, I was tall, I was, you know, athletic, curvy, all that. So no, he met me outside of school.
Now that's interesting on a side note in and of itself. Something interesting here, real quick. She calls him a predator, and most would agree, right? But I posted recently about a teacher that violated 3 boys in her classroom for a couple of years. And the response was mostly silence from women and a couple of guys getting up saying, I wish I had teachers like that when I was young. But notice the difference in the dynamic, right? When boys are violated by older women, it's that they're lucky, It's that the women shouldn't be criticized. And if the question is going to come up about her behavior, what happened in her past that traumatized her to make her want to do this to boys? But notice how Kenya responds in describing this man who's 11 years older than her and how they interacted. He's described as a predator, right? We don't do this in the same kind of way. This is part of that internalized anti-Black misandry. It's acceptable to frame men however, and men don't have a problem with it. I'm not defending him. If you're 27 and you're fucking with a 14-year-old, I have no problem calling you a predator. My issue is that when you got a 30-year-old woman having sex with 12-year-old boys, it's somehow either applauded or ignored, as if that's not going to do damage. And I'm saying this as a father. Looking back in retrospect, it may sound like a nice idea to some men, but the reality is I've watched my son since the first day he came out the womb. I didn't know what innocence was until I held him in my hands the day he was born. And I can tell you that if an older woman took advantage of my son in his earliest years, most especially, that would be as traumatizing as when a grown man does it to a young woman, a young girl. It's traumatic. But people want to impose their own sexual interests on this and make it like a porno. It doesn't work like that. Young boys are traumatized all the time. The difference is we don't have a language for it. We only have a language for female victimization when it comes to things like this, whether it's molestation, sexual assault, whatever it is. We don't have a language for it for boys. So we either celebrate it or we hit some cognitive dissonance with it and ignore it. But she can actually call him a predator, and all of us can nod our heads in agreement. But let it be a 30-year-old teacher, female teacher, and 12-year-old boy. Watch the responses even we give.
And so anyway, my mother was calling the pageant director and was telling her I was an alcoholic, I was dating this older man, I was all of these horrible things, and that I should not be her beauty queen. I was a horrible representation. And she tried to get my crown taken away. And I remember having this meeting with both of my grandmothers being there with, her name was Rosa Robinson. And my grandmother, both of my grandmothers had to come, and it was like a trial. And I was on trial to fighting to keep my first crown that I ever won. And it was all because of my grandmother. I have all the proof, the letters, I have everything in my safety deposit box. My mother's.
So we'll just end it there, right? But I just want to be clear. What we're talking about is not just something that boys experience, even though boys are heavily overlooked and dismissed in regard to this. Abuse is downplayed with boys. For the most part, people see boys as just smaller pit bulls, and they see grown Black men as grown pit bulls. Often we're dehumanized in that way in the public imagination, even within the Black community. I would argue there's a great deal of that, because again, as long as men are violent with each other, it's par for the course. It's not until they become violent with others that it's a problem. And when they endure violence from others in the community, we have no vocabulary for it. And in some respects, they just kind of low-key deserve it. But I just wanted to kind of talk a little bit about this, because Bud Crawford's story, although extreme, is very reminiscent of what scores of Black men and boys in particular have had to deal with. And it goes unacknowledged. They have to deal with various types of abuse, various types of abandonment, right? The withdrawal of affection and affirmation. And much of the time you'll hear men and women talk about withholding affection is what's going to make him a man. No, withholding affection is not necessarily what makes you a man. Being taught how to navigate difficulty, strife, stress, how to navigate it with goal setting, right? How to navigate it with consistency toward moving toward that goal, having to navigate it with learning how to build relationships, to find people to help you navigate these things by mentoring you, giving you information. Those are the kinds of tools that build a man from a boy. Yes, there is a degree of toughening that happens in the face of dealing with adversity, but that has nothing to do with withholding affection. Because here's the thing. When you look at men's relationships with each other, there's all kinds of affection. It's just not conventional by women's standards. See, we use women's standards of expressing emotion as the standard. And if it doesn't look like that, it must not be happening. And these are the kinds of, even in psychology, these are the kinds of responses I'm seeing when it comes to trying to make sense of black men's behavior. The idea is if we don't mimic women, that we're somehow not doing it. No, I wouldn't argue that by any means. Men have their own ways of expressing affection. Could it be more effective? Sure. There are a lot of reasons why it could and a lot of reasons why it's not. But before we even have that conversation, if you have no respect for the very base humanity of the black males in question, I don't even want to talk to you about those other issues because we got fundamental issues to deal with first. And black men as a whole, I would argue, have not been, again, as a collective, taught how to value their own humanity. They've not. We've been taught that our humanity is substandard to others, including those in our own community. We've been taught in our very own homes growing up that our value doesn't matter. We watched our fathers, we watched our grandfathers demonstrate that their value was of lesser importance. We've seen this passed down generationally too. Work until you die, or leave to find something else in your life to sustain you while being called a deadbeat. There's a whole lot of dynamics we can look at, but very few affirm black male life. And so I want us to actually be able to create a dynamic where we can actually have those conversations with each other about what we need. Because nobody else is going to do it. And I do it because I love you, brothers. I love my son. I love my father. And I do love the women in my family. Don't get me twisted. But I'm saying I can say that I love black men. I can say I love individual black men. And I don't blink. And I don't got to say no homo. I don't got to do none of that shit. I love y'all. And I want to see y'all live and enjoy life. Not just endure it. Not just get to the age of 50 something and die. I want to see you thrive and live long. What is it the Vulcans used to say? Live long and prosper. I want to see black men do that. Because I've seen just the most impressive, beautiful, powerful, vicious forms of fucking humanity and sacrifice come from black men that never got regarded. I've had black men do things for me that I never even knew to ask for. Just on a level of brotherhood that I was learning how to interact with. Just black men just... I'll leave y'all with one story. And this is nothing incredible or ground shaking, but it was for me. When I went to Temple, I was there for a year to do my master's in African American Studies. I never lived out of state. I grew up in California, born in Brooklyn, but grew up in California. Never really been out of state. And I went to Philadelphia at Temple to get my master's. And I'm living in this little apartment and I am by myself. I don't know anybody, don't have any family, don't have any friends, and I wasn't there long enough to build many. I had a few associates, but they came and went. And I could not find a job for the life of me. Man, I could not find a job. I was broke. And that was my first introduction to fucking snow. So I'm in Philly. It's cold as shit. I'm walking around in khakis and I didn't know nothing about winter. Shit, I've never been anywhere with true seasons before. So I'm in Philly freezing my ass off and I'm broke. Didn't have any money for food, but I'm working on a master's degree. And when the first day I moved in, I saw this older brother who was a janitor. That's what he was. He was a janitor. He had an afro and he never spoke to people. He's one of them cats that been there for like 30 years, just doing his thing. And he nodded at me and I nodded back. And one day, I think he heard me talking to someone else about not being able to find a job. And it was like 6 a.m. one day, and he knocked on my door. I'm knocked out, and he's knocking and banging on my door. And I finally opened the door, not knowing what to expect, and this brother's standing there. And he hands me a piece of paper. He says, "Young man, this place is hiring. I heard you needed a job." He didn't have to do that. He sought out where I lived. At 6 a.m. when he started his shift, he came in to give me some information. And sure enough, I got that job, which, to be honest with you, I'm convinced it went past he found out a job was available. I really think it went past that. I really do. You can't tell me nothing. In my heart of hearts, I know that brother had more to do with me getting that job than me interviewing. And by the end of the next day, I had a job. Yeah. And I've seen scores of black men do shit like that for others and for me. That type of humanity is what makes me love brothers. Because we have it, even though nobody acknowledges it. Nobody. And I still have brothers doing that. Don't get it twisted. BGS has done that for me 10 times over. And I ain't asking for shit. But my point to you is that the humanity of black men, the capacity to love, the capacity to sacrifice, the capacity to support and brotherhood has never gone anywhere. We do need to build on it. We do need to use more of it. We do need to expand on it, but don't get it twisted. It's never gone anywhere. And using female standards of emotional expression to measure whether or not black men are human isn't going to fucking work, because it's going to make invisible the types of interaction and exchange that black men engage in every day. So if we can acknowledge that it exists and build on it, we can help it grow. Shout out to Tyrone McLeod for that generous donation. He says, thank you, my brother. Love you too. I love y'all. Absolutely. I love you, brother Tyrone. I hope you guys do well. I want to see us succeed, and I want us to do it with each other and with each other's support. So again, thank you for the time. Thank you if you've purchased my book. If you've not, it's in the description box. Click the link, check it out, support it, pass it around, share it, share the show, share other brothers' shows, black male media. This is where we got to start. Now, I got some other things happening this week, as I told y'all. So I will let you know how those things go. I'll try not to be gone as long, but it's a time period I've never seen before. So I'm having some experiences that are just mind blowing. But anyway, y'all take it easy. I love y'all. Peace.